I signed the divorce papers that morning, the ink cold and indifferent on the stark white paper. My hands didn't tremble. They hadn't for a long time, not since the night I lost more than I could bear. I glanced across the table at my ex-husband, his gaze fixed somewhere near the window. The light filtering through cast sharp lines across his face, making him appear starker, more distant. It had been 4 years, yet sitting here with him, finalizing what had begun on a stormy night, felt both foreign and eerily familiar. "Are you okay with this?" I asked, my voice steady. He simply nodded, his eyes finally meeting mine. They were filled with a sorrow that seemed to reach back through the years to a time when we shared everything. I turned away, the moment too laden with memories of a life that no longer existed. I moved through my small art gallery with a sense of ownership that went beyond the deeds and paperwork. The walls, adorned with vibrant canvases, reflected parts of my soul I had rediscovered in the solitude of my new life. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, and I was arranging a new piece in the corner when the bell over the door chimed. I looked up to find a man watching me, his eyes scanning the colors and shapes before resting on mine. "These are incredible," he said, stepping closer. His interest seemed genuine, a rarity I wasn't accustomed to anymore. I found myself explaining the inspiration behind each piece, revealing more of myself than I had intended. "Art seems to be not only your profession but also your refuge," he observed thoughtfully, making me pause. Yes, I thought, it had been my sanctuary, a place where I could mend the fragments of my past into something whole and beautiful again. I invited him to the opening of my new exhibit the following week, surprised at my own spontaneity. The gallery was bustling with guests on the evening of the event, the air filled with the soft murmur of conversations and the gentle clinking of glasses. I was adjusting a light fixture when I felt a presence beside me. Turning, I saw him again, his posture relaxed, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "It looks even more impressive tonight," he said, his gaze sweeping across the room before settling back on me. "Thank you," I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me, a feeling I hadn't anticipated. We moved through the crowd together, discussing art, life, and the little oddities that make up our world. Every so often, I caught him looking at me with a curiosity that felt like the touch of sunlight after a long storm. It was both unnerving and exhilarating. I wanted to delve into this new feeling, to explore it like the textures and hues of my paintings, yet part of me held back, tethered by the past's shadows. I watched him from across the dimly lit cafe, the way the light caught the angles of his face, casting shadows that danced with his expressions. I sipped my coffee, the bitter warmth contrasting sharply with the coldness of my hands. He smiled at me, a slow, knowing curve of his lips that suggested he understood more than what lay on the surface. I felt my heart flutter, an involuntary response that both irritated and thrilled me. "Are you always this quiet?" he asked, leaning forward, his elbows resting casually on the table. I shrugged, the gesture feeling unusually heavy. "I guess I'm just used to listening more than talking," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper as if the admission were a secret I had never told anyone else. He nodded thoughtfully, his gaze not leaving mine. "I find that intriguing," he said. "It makes me wonder what you're thinking about." I laughed softly, the sound surprising me. "Mostly, I'm thinking about how odd it is to be here with you, feeling something I can't quite name." "Maybe you don't need to name it," he suggested, his tone gentle. "Maybe it's enough just to feel it." I considered his words, turning them over in my mind like pebbles smoothed by a relentless tide. "Maybe," I agreed, feeling a smile tug at the corners of my mouth. I found myself walking beside him down the quaint street that housed the cafe. The evening air was crisp, whispering through the trees like old friends sharing secrets. I pulled my jacket tighter around myself, suddenly aware of the chill. He noticed and without a word, draped his scarf around my shoulders. I was struck by the gesture, so simple yet intimate, and I felt my cheeks warm with unexpected bashfulness. "Do you paint landscapes?" he asked, pointing to a particularly vibrant array of autumn leaves that hung like jewels from the branches. I nodded. "I try to. But I find that it's difficult to capture the essence of nature. It's like it's always just out of reach. He smiled. Maybe that's what makes it worth trying. I pondered his words, realizing that he spoke with a passion that mirrored my own, though his was for words, and mine was for paint. Do you think words can capture everything? I asked, genuinely curious. Maybe not everything, he conceded, but enough to make us feel connected, understood. I felt a surge of connection then, a tether forming between his words and my feelings, linking something deep within me to the world outside. We ended up at a small park, the city lights casting long shadows across the grass. I sat on a bench, pulling his scarf tighter around me, the fabric still warm from his presence. I watched him as he paced slightly, hands buried deep in his pockets, lost in thought. Sometimes I feel like I'm just on the verge of understanding something significant, I said into the silence, not sure why I felt compelled to reveal such a thought. He stopped pacing and turned to face me, his eyes reflecting the city lights. What do you think it might be? I hesitated, afraid that speaking the words aloud might break the spell of the evening. I think maybe it's that I'm finally ready to let go of my past, to stop letting it dictate my future. He sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat from his body. That sounds like a significant realization, he said softly. I nodded, feeling the weight of the years begin to lift off my shoulders. It is. And I think maybe I'm also ready to explore new possibilities, I added, turning to look at him, my heart pounding with the implications of my own words. He reached out, his hand covering mine, warm and reassuring. I'm glad to hear that, he said, because I'd like to be one of those possibilities, if you're willing. I squeezed his hand, the gesture simple but loaded with meaning. I think I'd like that, I whispered, feeling for the first time in a long while that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I wove my fingers through his, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine. As I looked up, I noticed the last rays of the sunset painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, a backdrop so fitting it could only be by design. I've never watched the sunset from here before, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper as if afraid to break the spell. He smiled, his eyes reflecting the fiery sky. I'm glad I get to share this with you, he said, his thumb caressing the back of my hand gently. We sat in silence, the only sounds the soft rustle of leaves and the distant calls of evening birds. As twilight deepened into dusk, I felt an unfamiliar peace settling over me, the chaos of my past months losing its grip. It's beautiful, I murmured, not just speaking of the sunset but of the moment, of the comforting ease between us. I know something even more beautiful, he replied, his gaze never leaving my face. What's that? I asked, my heart skipping a beat. The way you smile when you're genuinely happy. I see it now, in your eyes, he said softly. His words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, and I found myself leaning into him, my head resting on his shoulder. I'm happy now, I confessed, letting my guard down, letting him see the real me, maybe for the first time. I woke up the next morning with a sense of lightness, my heart feeling like it might lift me right out of my bed. I stretched my arms above my head, the memory of the previous evening wrapping me in a soft haze of happiness. I hadn't dreamed, or if I had, it was only of laughter and the gentle press of a hand in mine. I made my way to the kitchen, my fingers brushing against the countertop as I filled the kettle. The mundane task felt different today, as if every small action was imbued with a new significance. I chose 2 mugs, thinking of how he might like his coffee. The doorbell rang just as I was spooning coffee into the filter. My heart leapt. It's open, I called, smoothing down my hair as I heard the door creak. He stepped into the kitchen, a bashful smile on his face. I hope I'm not too early, he said, his eyes bright. You're just in time, I assured him, my nerves tingling. Coffee? I'd love some, thank you, he replied, watching me as I poured the boiling water. I handed him his mug, our fingers brushing briefly, and that familiar jolt of electricity shot through me. We moved to the living room, sitting on the couch with our knees almost touching. About last night, he started, setting his mug down. Yes? I held my breath, a mix of anticipation and fear knotting in my stomach. I meant every word, he said earnestly. I haven't felt this way in a long time. Neither have I whispered, my words floating between us like a fragile bubble, waiting to be burst or gently tucked away as a cherished memory. I invited him to walk with me, the need to move, to feel the solid ground under my feet suddenly overwhelming. We strolled through the nearby park, the morning light sifting through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on our path. I watched our shadows mingling and overlapping on the pavement, a silent testament to our growing closeness. "Do you come here often?" he asked, as we followed the winding path. "Not as often as I'd like," I confessed. "But I think that might change." "I'd like that," he said, a smile playing on his lips. "Maybe next time, I can bring a picnic. We could make a day of it." I nodded, the image of us lying on a blanket, surrounded by nature and lost in conversation, filling me with an unexpected warmth. "I'd really like that," I said, my voice steady but my heart racing. We reached a small bridge over a trickling stream, and I paused, leaning on the railing. I watched the water flow beneath us, steady and sure. "I'm not very good at this," I started, my words tumbling out. "This, being open, being vulnerable. It's been a long time since I've allowed myself to feel anything like this." He stepped closer, his presence enveloping me. "We can take it as slow as you need," he promised, his voice a soothing balm. "I'm here with you, for as long as you'll have me." I turned to face him, my decision made. "I want you here," I said, knowing I was stepping into a new chapter of my life, one that I hoped, against all my fears, would be filled with laughter and gentle sunsets, and maybe, just maybe, love. I watched as his eyes widened slightly, a mixture of surprise and something warmer flickering across his face. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice a soft rumble that vibrated through the chilly air between us. I nodded, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest, echoing my nerves and excitement. "I've never been more sure about anything," I admitted, feeling the weight of my words hang between us. I studied his expression, searching for any sign of hesitation, but found none. Instead, his hand reached out, fingers trembling slightly as they brushed against mine. I felt a spark, a connection that seemed to bridge the gap of our past misunderstandings and forge something new and tentative. I invited him inside, the warm glow from my living room lamp casting a soft light over us. I noticed how he paused at the threshold, a silent question in his eyes, and I realized this was more than just an invitation to step into my home, it was an invitation to step into my life. I led him to the couch, where we sat at opposite ends, the space between us charged with unspoken questions and possibilities. "I wasn't sure if I'd ever see you again," I confessed, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear nervously. "I thought the same," he replied, his gaze fixed on me, intense yet tender. "But I couldn't stay away. Not from you." His words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, soothing the raw edges of my fears. I took a deep breath, the air filled with the scent of my lavender candles I had lit earlier. "I've been thinking a lot about us," I started, unsure of how to continue, about how much I've missed you. About what I want in my life. I paused, my heart racing with the vulnerability of my confession. "And what is that?" he asked, leaning in slightly, his eyes locked on mine. "I want happiness. I want to build something lasting. With someone who understands me." I met his gaze steadily, my statement hanging between us, heavy with implication. He moved closer, closing the distance on the couch until our knees touched. "I want that too," he said, his voice low and earnest. "I want to try again, if you're willing." I felt my breath catch in my throat as I considered his words. I had dreamed of this moment, of reconciliation and a second chance, yet now that it was here, I felt a surge of fear. Could we really make it work this time? My mind raced with doubts, but my heart urged me to leap. "I am willing," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But it scares me. We've hurt each other before." "I know," he acknowledged, reaching out to take my hand, his touch steady and sure. "I'm scared too." But I believe in us, in what we could be. Let's take it slow. I squeezed his hand, a symbolic gesture of my agreement, my commitment to try. We sat there, our hands entwined, the silence comfortable and filled with new beginnings. Outside, the sun began to set, casting a golden glow through the window, bathing us in its light. It felt like the universe was affirming our decision, wrapping us in its radiant approval. As the light faded into dusk, I leaned against him, my head resting on his shoulder. I think this is what gentle sunsets are meant for, I murmured, new beginnings. Yes, he whispered back, his breath warm against my ear. And maybe, just maybe, love. I hesitated by the door, my hand hovering over the brass knob, the cool metal almost biting my warm skin. The cafe buzzed with the low murmur of voices, the smell of coffee and baked croissants heavy in the air. He sat at our usual table by the window, the glow of the late afternoon sun outlining his profile. I caught my reflection in the glass door, eyes wide, heart pounding, and pushed it open. I approached him hesitantly, my footsteps muted against the rustic wooden floor. I'm glad you came, he greeted me, his voice a soothing balm that belied the turmoil swirling inside me. I slid into the chair across from him, the familiar scrape of wood against wood grounding me. I almost didn't, I confessed, my fingers tracing the rim of the white ceramic cup he'd ordered for me. I'm scared, you know. Scared of what this means. He reached across, his hand covering mine. I know. I am too. But I also know that I don't want to lose you again. Not without trying. Can we start slow? Just see where things go? His eyes searched mine, hopeful yet cautious. I nodded, feeling a tentative spark of hope flicker within me. Starting slow sounds perfect. I found myself walking with him along the riverbank, the city lights casting long shadows on the path. Our conversation flowed more easily now, the initial awkwardness washed away by laughter and shared memories. I noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, a detail I had adored and then forgotten in the throes of our separation. Remember the first time we walked here? He asked, his voice tinged with nostalgia. I smiled, the memory vivid in my mind. You tried to impress me by jumping over the bench and almost fell into the river. He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. I was such a fool. But my fool, I said softly, the words slipping out before I could catch them. I saw his smile widen, the affection in his eyes undeniable. Yes, you're fool, he agreed, his hand finding mine as we walked. The connection felt natural, right? I squeezed his hand, reassured by the solidity of his presence. Weeks passed, and with each day, my confidence in us, in this rekindled flame, grew. I sat at my desk, the glow of the computer screen illuminating the letter I had begun to write. It wasn't a letter of goodbyes as I had feared months ago, but one of new beginnings. I wrote about hope, about the beauty in second chances, and the joy in rediscovering each other. I heard the front door open and close, his footsteps approaching. I turned in my chair, watching as he came into the room, a tentative smile on his face. I made us dinner, he announced, a hint of pride in his voice. Can I tempt you away from your work? I stood, wrapping my arms around him, feeling the rightness of his embrace. You can always tempt me, I whispered, and he laughed, the sound as delightful to me as music. As we walked to the kitchen, hand in hand, I felt my heart swell. I knew there would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and fear, but as I looked at him, I felt a deep, unshakable certainty. I was ready to face it all, as long as it was with him.